Council meeting to order. If you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, members present this evening are myself, Mayor Morrow, Council members Gearbaugh, CO, Rhodes, McClellan, Tahar, and Dillon. From City staff, we have City Manager Campbell, Clerk Royal, City Treasurer Bennett, Superintendent Engineer Rubel, Administrative Assistant Superintendent Fetchett, and Police Chief Rennick. For the rest of you who are in the audience this evening, if you'd please sign in the back to my left, we would appreciate that. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended. First, under the presentation portion, our new administrative assistant, Eleanor, has already been introduced and she left, so that will be replaced with a veterans acknowledgement. Then when we get to new business item 16-201, ethics policy, this week we're actually just going to acknowledge receipt of the ethics policy, have discussion, make any corrections or additions, and then approve it next week because we have a regular council meeting just a week from now. And then City Council does not need to reconvene after the closed session. So the discussion portion of the agenda and the public comment period will precede council convening into closed session. And then under the discussion portion of the agenda, I want to briefly touch on the rec center roof and the Salt Spring historic marker. And those two items would follow reports and other announcements and the strategic plan. So I apologize for all of those changes. Is that clear to everyone? Yes?
Move to approve as amended.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman McClellan. I'll get you on the next one, Ms. Dillon. All those in favor of approving the agenda as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We'll proceed then to the first of four presentations, which is our Veterans Day acknowledgement.
Son? Can you hear me, folks? Okay, very good. Good evening, my friends. First of all, we are delighted that all of you are with us this evening, but in particular, our current servicemen and women and our retired servicemen and women. So if you are able to stand or raise your hand, if you served at any time in any branch of our armed forces, if you'd please rise or acknowledge that so we can give you a round of applause. And I do want to acknowledge, in addition to these fine individuals, we had a few that had to leave, including our former mayor and our former colleague Don Shelton, who served with great distinction in the United States Army. I believe during the Vietnam era. Is that correct, Mr. Correct. I hope. Did you stand as well, Mr. CO?
I'm sorry?
Did you stand as well when we acknowledged our veterans?
I did.
Excellent, okay. Just wanted to make sure of that. Our colleague, Jack Seal, is also a Navy veteran, or an Army veteran.
Army.
Yeah, excellent. Well, again, we are delighted to have you with us. We hope that you helped yourself to some refreshments. We hope that as you make your exit this evening, you'll help yourself to some more refreshments, and those refreshments are also for all of the friends, family, and supporters of our servicemen and women as well. I want to read a resolution that was passed by council. Actually, this resolution has been passed by City Council for many years, but it was passed at one of our October meetings. And I want to read it in its entirety, and then I'm very pleased, I'm going to be very pleased, to turn the floor over to our very own Tim Driscoll, who is the commander of our local American Legion post and has done, an individual who's done so much for our servicemen and women and their families, and is a great patriot and a good friend. So Tim, thank you for being here. This is the resolution, my friends, and I think it underscores the value that we in the Saline community place on those who serve a cause greater than themselves, in particular who have served in the United States military. Whereas this week will be set aside to honor and thank the men and women who fought to protect our freedoms at home and extend them abroad. And whereas we affirm one of the most fundamental obligations as citizens of this country, to demonstrate respect and support for those who sacrificed for peace and freedom by serving in our nation's armed forces. And whereas the city of Saline is honored to pay tribute to the fallen, the missing, the wounded, and the millions who have served and those awaiting their return. And whereas the United States Congress has provided that November the 11th of each year shall be the holiday to honor our veterans. And whereas it is appropriate to commend those individuals who have served and are currently serving in our armed forces and to support them in every aspect. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Brian D. Morrow, Mayor of the great city of Saline, on behalf of the citizens of Saline, do hereby proclaim, the week of November the 11th to be Veterans Appreciation and Recognition Week in the city of Saline, and call upon all of our residents of this great community to join me in honoring these American heroes. And I set my hand and seal of this document on the 17th day of October 2016. Again, to all of you who have served, thank you. We are in your debt. Tim, do you want to come up? Let's give Mr. Driscoll a round of applause.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, veterans. I represent a lot of different veterans organizations. I'm proud to say that. We do everything we can for our veterans up in the hospital, in their homes. We do everything we can do for our community. That's what we were taught by the greatest generation who came before us in the Great War. And most of us served in the Vietnam War, my age, okay? Everywhere we go, we see a need and we try and fill it in. And that's exactly what everybody in this room I know does with their life, whether it's through church or town or service to your community, whatever it is, it's because you're doing it from your heart and because you know it's right. Now, I brought with me tonight a little something. It's called a challenge coin. And in the service, all the branches, all the different organizations usually have, all the units have their own challenge coin. And the one I brought with me tonight is from the Vietnam veterans. It's from the State Council. And on the other side, there is a shroud of, we'll say, death. And that's from the Agent Orange, where we were sprayed over there in Vietnam. And it's affected so many lives in so many horrible ways. And it goes through many, many different generations and all the way to our children. And it's something that this is a battle that we just keep on fighting till we can have everybody taken care of and looked at and everybody do the scientific work they must be done. And tonight, Brian, I want to give you this one on behalf of the whole town and all the veterans in it because of so much you've done for us. And the council, thank you very much for Veterans Day and everything else you do for us. We appreciate it with all our hearts. Thank you, everybody in this room. God bless.
Well, Tim, on behalf of myself, my 6 council colleagues, and everyone in the Saline community, I'm honored to accept this as a token of the appreciation and respect that we extend to all of our servicemen and women. So thank you very much. Again, I want to acknowledge all of the veterans who are with us today. If you'd like to stay, you're more than welcome to do so. If you'd like to take your leave, I understand. Again, help yourself to some refreshments. We honor, we respect you, and we appreciate each one of you taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us this evening. Let's give them all one more round of applause. And I don't have my agenda with me, but up next I believe we have the Saline Be Green Awards. Is that correct? And we have some representatives from our very own Environmental Commission with us this evening, so I'll turn it over to you, gentlemen. Bruce, are you coming up as well? Okay.
Thank you.
And David, yeah.
Yes, if David can join us. So I'm Dennis Kittle. I'm the chairman of the 2016 Environmental Commission for the City of Saline, joined by Bruce Westlake, who's our vice chairman this year. Looking in the back to make sure no other commission members have snuck in the door here to recognize. And then we have David Rhodes, who's our council sponsor. Tonight, what we're doing is we thank the council for letting us present the first recipients of the Saline Be Green Award. The Saline Be Green Award is an award that we wanted to give residents of Saline, businesses of Saline, who show an environmental impact, something they've done either environmentally, water usage, recycling, any type of green event. Tomorrow is America's Recycles Day, so this is in conjunction with America's Recycles Day. It's not a well-known national holiday, but it's a time for us to reflect and look at what we do in using materials, using our day-to-day lives. Do we need it? Can we reuse it? Can we recycle it? And ask ourselves about our environment. So I'd like to present some of the awards here. If the recipients are here, I do have them in order. Yeah. If our recipients are here, yes, we'd like you to come up and receive your award. And I'd like to read just a few items here of what each award recipient has done. The first one, as I call your name, Aiden Korichner. Aiden was nominated at the Saline Green. Aiden, come reward. What I'd like to do is stand on this side, and then at the end we'll get some photographs. Aiden was nominated for recognition of his efforts and leadership in the Nike Better World Reuse of Shoe Drive. Aiden coordinated the collection of over 100 pairs of shoes. They were used, there were shoes from neighbors, teammates, and community members. Instead of ending up in a landfill, these were ground and reused for athletic fields. His demonstrated commitment to the environment is documented in the December 2015 Youth Runner magazine. So Aiden, thank you very much. Our second resident is Sheila Bourgogne. Sheila became a certified naturalist through a conservation program at the Michigan State University. She's skilled at identifying birds and plants. She's one of the 2 volunteer stewards for the Joan Rodman Memorial Preserve just west of Saline in the Saline River. In this capacity, she scouts for invasive species, helps eradicate them, leads volunteer efforts, and she participates in town leads nature walks. So Sheila, thank you very much. In our non-residential category, we have the Saline District Library, and I think we have Mary Ellen Mulcrone here today. Mary, thank you. The Saline District Library is a community leader and a showcase venue of working environmental programs. The library has installed solar panels, a rain garden that manages runoff in the parking lots. The library staff volunteers to recycle packaging materials, paper envelopes, and other things. The library hosts educational events on the topics such as master rain gardening and alternative energy. The Friends of the Library manage both donated books as well as culled items from the library, giving books, tapes, CDs a second useful life. I mean, this is really a community gem that we hear here, and Mary, thank you for receiving it. I also want to mention, I think we all know that this was also predicated by Leslie Wiedehammer, who we lost this year. Leslie had many years of service, and we all know that, who really laid the groundwork for this really community item in environmental showcase. So thank you. Our second non-residential is the Kerrigan Cafe. Karen Kerrigan is here to accept the award. Kerrigan's Cafe does their best effort to reduce the impact of the restaurant's operation, making sure there's always a recycling container available to customers. They reduce the types and amounts of packaging and training their staff to separate the trash from the recyclables. Kerrigan uses china dishes instead of disposable items to serve customers. The to-go trays are compost friendly, as well as the drink cups. They've invested in LED compact fluorescent lighting to reduce the energy, and customers are really engaged here, and they thank Kerrigan's Cafe for making an effort. And then in our non-residential, we have Fineo. Fineo, I don't know if anybody's here from Fineo. And who do we have?
I'm Jamie, this is Jason, and Lindsay.
Hi, welcome. Fineo is a Saline business that's quietly operated on Bennett Street for many years, supplying photography albums to photography studios. They make high-quality albums and products for the professional photographer. Each Fineo album is handmade in the USA, and they try to create minimal environmental impact through packaging while encouraging employees to reduce and reuse and recycle. They recently lost a founder here in October, Christine Perry Burke, and she was the driving force. She was the driving force for the green philosophy at Fineo, and the company is accepting the award in Christine's honor. Also in the non-residential, we have the First Presbyterian Church, and we have Fred Lupton. Thank you, Fred, accepting. The First Presbyterian Church of Saline was nominated for adding solar systems to generate clean energy. The project allowed parishioners to reduce the carbon footprint by sponsoring a panel for about $800. This was a very unique way to start and initiate a program. The novel way divided up the cost of the solar panels and their installation of equipment, dividing the cost into manageable sized pieces that parishioners could buy into. That not only made the installation possible, it also allowed people who may not otherwise be able to install solar on their own property a chance to participate in cost savings for energy. Thank you. And our final recipient is the Pleasant Ridge Elementary School of Saline. We have Tracy Pratt, Kevin Masson, and Rex Clary, I see. Rex, are you coming up as well? Pleasant Ridge Elementary has demonstrated an outstanding example of being engaged in sustainable practices and recycling efforts, teaching our next generation the habits that will help our city and society going forward. This is really led by Nicole Kent and supported by Rex Clary, who's the Director of Facilities, and Tracy Pratt. This is an effort that Nicole really pushes forward in school participation from students, teachers, staff, and parents. It works together as a group and a team. And it's an outstanding example. The school runs zero waste events, celebrates Earth Day each year, and the efforts really deserve recognition, especially the dedication of Nicole, Rex, and Tracy. We hope to continue this. Remember, tomorrow is America's Recycle Day. If we could get a couple pictures of, yeah, David, yeah,
You should get in there.
Brian.
I don't know if they can fit everybody. Bob, can you get everybody in there?
Yeah. All right, ready? Okay, I think we got it.
We all good? You good, man? All right, excellent. Well, that was marvelous. I want to thank the Environmental Commission for their work. I can't imagine how you could have chosen better organizations and better individuals. So well done. Okay, my friends, moving on the presentation portion of the agenda this evening is the proclamation for Saline for the 50th anniversary of our sister city relationship with Brecon Wales, and I'd like to invite our former council colleague Jim Roth, who's the current president of the Friendship Guild, to come forward. And Jim and I'm going to share a few remarks first, Jim, and then I'm going to turn it over to you if you'd like to add anything. So both the city of Saline and Brecon Wales have received a proclamation similar to this, acknowledging 50 years of friendship. This version actually will be mailed to the city clerk and mayor of Brecon Wales. The city prepared a proclamation that will also be sent to Brecon Wales, signed by myself and all 6 of my colleagues. And then it has been customary over the years for the mayors to exchange gifts. Can I hold that for just a second? This is not a humidor, it does not include cigars. Too bad. But these turned out very nice. So these are customized coasters that have Saline's coordinates on them. And what's particularly cool about them is it is a custom-made coaster. There are 4 of them. They are made by the Detroit Coaster Company, which of course exists in the great city of Detroit, and were sold by a store in downtown Northville that sells only Michigan-made items. So I think this is pretty cool, and that will be sent as a personal gift from myself to the mayor of Brecon, Wales. Now, needless to say, this is a significant milestone. Most communities cannot boast sister city relationships that have spanned more than 5 decades. It's a very special, very personal relationship, friend to friend, neighbor to neighbor, community to community. And it has been a success because of people like Jim and Joan Roth, who have nurtured the relationship and supported it for many decades. So why don't we give Jim a round of applause.
The history of this goes back to the city council in 1966. Mr. Johnson was mayor at that particular time, and the first group that went over there was Musical Youth International. And then there was some exchange from some of the mayors and other dignitaries, both from Saline and from Brecon. So I cannot take all the credit for that. I was introduced to that when I first came to Saline, that I was kind of with Mrs. McCoy in White Acres and Musical Youth International, being a colleague of hers. She needed some young person that could drive better than her to help host the people she was housing in her upstairs. And she lived at this brick house just east of town where you see a lot of the shrubs in front of the house. So it got its start there, and then it became much more common for a group, a city had a group formed as the Saline Brecon Friendship Guild. They had a guild like that similar to us, and we exchanged several visits through the years. And what's happened there is Saline is still ready to go, and many people in Brecon have aged out. And and we're looking for the young blood to come in. There's been many exchanges through the schools in the past, so we're hoping that there's still some life along with it. So our really connection is, and has always been, is from city to city. And our guild is the one that's helping make it that city can afford that being hosted. So it's been, I have a lot of predecessors, a lot of helpers through the years that kept this thing going, so I cannot take the credit. This time they threw the torch at me, kind of the rough years. So we'll get through these, and I hope for better exchanges. There was a plan that one of their choirs, men's choirs, are going to come over here, but finances, the cost, the extra cost that they have, and the extra insurance they need to carry for them to come over to our country made it prohibitive, and for these farmers to come over this direction. So we're still alive, and we do have a sister city over there, and I'm sure you're welcome to come over there at any particular point in time. We have a group that we haven't been charging any membership. You can come and talk with us about what it's about in exchange if you have an interest in Wales. And it ends up being one of the most beautiful spots in Wales because of the Brecon Beacons right there, and it's nice and hilly. So it's a great place. Many, many friendships over there through the years. And it's too bad we all age. If we could all stay young like our mayor here, we'd have many more years ahead of us. Thank you.
Let's give Jim one more round of applause. And again, as Mr. Roth said, it is a very special relationship. Many important and valued relationships have been established between Salinians and the folks in Brecon, Wales. A copy of the resolution that council passed, as well as a copy of the proclamation from Sister Cities International, will be on display in one of our display cases, in fact, the Brecon, Wales display case in the coming weeks. Again, to denote the significance and the importance of this relationship. Jim, thank you again for being here tonight. Chief Rennick, I think you're up next with the quarterly police department report.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to go over the activity of the police department within the last quarter. Just want to let you know that of the Lexipol policies, every single one of them have been reviewed and have been completed. And of those 155, we have 55 of them that have now been released to the officers and the sergeants. And as a matter of fact, as of today, the last one was read, and so Chapter 4 will be released tomorrow. And hopefully by the middle of next month, we'll have over half of those policies issued to our officers, which upon talking to Lexipol is apparently quite an accomplishment to get those released as quickly as we've been releasing those. The daily training bulletins will be released after Chapter 4. And in talking with Lexipol, they suggest that you have at least half your policies released before the daily training bulletins start. And so that will hopefully begin by the end of the year. Communication within the department is roughly the same as what it's been over the last quarter. State staff meetings, shift meetings, we have roll call meetings every day, and hopefully those have improved some of the communication within the police department. Department audit, I'm very proud of. We had two of our individuals, Officer King and, three of them, and Officer Lupi and Sergeant Basso, who did the evidence room audit, which if you've never done one, it's extensive. We had 724 pieces of evidence which had to be individually counted. Usually would take days. They did this within a 12-hour period, and our evidence room, every single piece of evidence was accounted for, which is quite an accomplishment. Training for the last month, I attended a meeting of the South Michigan Criminal Justice Training Consortium, and I'm going to be recommending in our next year's budget to join that consortium. We're actually going to be able to attend training for no cost other than half of our 302 funds. And if we just did the driver's training alone for each of our officers, it would cost more than what the entire year's worth of fund is going to cost for that. So this will be a big boost in our training for the department. They're very excited about having us, and that's basically the mid-lower region of Michigan that makes that up, and looking forward to that. Sergeant Andy Hardwick graduated from the School of Police Staff and Command, which is a 350-hour school. He was very excited to be done with it, but also very sad because he made a lot of friends during that school. And Sergeant Mag has now signed up for that program, and he will begin in February. So when Sergeant Mag graduates, all of your command staff will have graduated from the School of Police Staff and Command, which is quite an accomplishment. Sergeant Mag is currently also in the Saline Leadership Institute, and will graduate from that in April. So he'll actually be going to both at the same time. Sergeant Basso went to the MPEDS, which is the Michigan Police Executive Development Series. It's put on by the FBI. That was a 40-hour advanced management course, and very excited about that. It's a great training and leadership school. We continue to use Police One in the police department and have training every month for each and every officer and sergeant. And then just recently, I attended, and Sergeant Basso was scheduled to attend accreditation manager training. And accreditation is a status that represents a significant professional achievement for police departments. And I think the last part of it is the most important, is that accreditation acknowledges the implementation of written directives, policies, and procedures that are conceptually sound and operationally effective. With Lexipol in place, this is hopefully going to be a relatively easy process for us. Other agencies that do not have Lexipol or something like Lexipol, it's going to be much more difficult for them. But I'm looking forward to this. Sergeant Basso has agreed to be the lead person in this project, and I think that this will be a great thing for our police department. The one advantage to the city financially is if you become accredited, MML will reduce your liability insurance by 5%, which is significantly more than what the cost of accreditation is going to be. So that will certainly be a positive for the city. And then additionally, as everybody walked in, I'm assuming you all saw that the our dispatch is all tore up. Hopefully by the end of December, that will be completely put back together. We'll have a very modern, very technologically sound dispatch center. Sergeant Basso, of course, presented that to you about a month and a half ago, and you approved that, so thank you very much for that. 102 and a half hours worth of traffic enforcement in our construction zone. And I have those numbers available for you if you'd like them. I didn't put them in the report, but if you'd like to know what was accomplished during that, I certainly can provide that. Special events during this last quarter were the Celtic Festival, Summerfest, and Oktoberfest that the officers worked overtime for. And just to let you know that besides doing all of this, our officers are very active, 17,538 activities over the course of this last quarter, and that includes everything from foot patrols to traffic stops to calls for service to helping somebody cross the street. So the variety of activities they do. And then lastly, I'd like to point out that our foot patrols were once again expanded. I began this program 2.5 years ago, where just the downtown area was affected, where officers would get out and walk in the downtown area. We expanded it to our shopping centers, so our 5 shopping centers are now included. And then just recently, we included the schools, so our officers walk the halls of the schools as well. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those, and just thank you for the opportunity to share this report with you.
Very good. Thank you, Chief Rennick. That was very thorough. Any questions for Chief Rennick? Mr. Gearbaugh?
More of an observation. Because of all the concerns that have been driving after this election and concerns about intimidation, harassment, and those aspects, I believe members of our council would appreciate that information be tracked or even provided to the council so that we understand that our community will continue to be a welcoming and very safe and secure place for all our citizens. And I think that's one of the things that I just need to emphasize at this time, because we're all feeling a little uncertain and a lot of people are feeling it. But I think we need to be aware of anything that should that arise because of the issues that have happened in DeWitt, Royal Oak, and even Traverse City. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Any additional questions or comments? Ms. Dillon?
I just wanted to clarify, on the foot patrols, is this during normal hours, normal shifts, or is this, additional hours? Is this overtime?
No, this is during the
During-
normal shifts
during-
and it's when the businesses are open. So these numbers do not reflect third shift, it's only first and second shift.
Okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments? No? Chief Rennick, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a pleasant evening. We move on now to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments on agenda items?
My name is Jim Roth, 186 Anwood Court, and the agenda item I want to talk about is the odor abatement study. First of all, I want to say thank you for having study being done. It's time that we really find out what the source of the odors are and see what the remedy may be. I'm a little disappointed in the high cost that this comes in at, that I think that sometimes the city ends up paying more than what they really should for something practical, even our local engineers could figure out. Because just with an odor meter, you can pretty much determine how strong the source of the odor is. The other part is that it won't be, recommendations won't come until August 25th of 2017, and that means that we're going to have to wait sometime in 2018 for these odor corrections to actually be made. That's a long, long time. So I just want to thank you, but gosh, it's not really jumping to taking care of the problem, which has been there for some time, called to attention many times over, and much engineering study has been done, firms been working on it, and the city has been paying the high price. So it appears like they're paying another high price again for something that drags out for another long period of time before any real corrections are made. So I want to thank you, but if there's any way to expedite this, it sure be appreciated by all the residents, especially that quarter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. We appreciate those comments. Additional comments on agenda items? Please.
Thank you. My name is Jack Sims. I live at 878 North Ann Arbor Street. Some of you have already heard this last week from the Planning Commission. I apologize to you in advance. But you understand how it is. I'm a prosecutor, so when I get a captive audience like this, that's just a bad deal for you. Anyway, I respectfully refer to the last of the new business, and that is the 911 North Ann Arbor rezoning. I respectfully request that you do not approve that ordinance. Our house, 878, if Saline Waterworks Road, which runs east and west, if it continued, it would go right into our front yard. We are on the east side of Ann Arbor Street, Ann Arbor Saline Road, however you want to label it out there. But I would respectfully suggest that this particular development is going to be more trouble, at least for us, than it's worth. I have to acknowledge the fact that it's been zoned commercial and for a number of years, and therefore it was not developed. And so therefore I have to acknowledge the fact that a property owner is going to want to try to do something with that property. But what turns out is, once again, our houses, our house at 878, our neighbors to the south at 868, and so on and so forth, I respectfully suggest that each of them are going to be burdened by this project much more than it's worth. I know you're going to have a traffic study on this. I do, especially now with the new crosswalk boulevard type item that is on North Ann Arbor Street. It already makes the left turn into, if we're coming southbound, it already makes the left turn into our driveways very difficult and very trying. Because of those of you who've been there will of course know that there is a left turn lane if you're heading north. There is a left turn lane if you want to go down to Saline Waterworks. Coming the other way, south, there is none. So, so then when we stop in the travel lane to make our left turn, as you might expect, the people behind us look at that in a very unfriendly way, if I may be euphemistic about that. I also respectfully suggest that at this point, at least, that still is a very handsome entry to the city, in that this still is a small city. It still is a part of the country. And when you're coming into town from the north, I mean, well, I know I shouldn't talk about 30 years ago. 30 years ago, the drive to Ann Arbor was a very pretty drive. And coming into town with that property on the right, it still is at least a pretty entrance to the city. So with the traffic pattern, with the looks, and frankly, with what we expect, and don't get me wrong, I understand that we're on Main Street, our property values are going to be lower anyway. But this is one more burden that we're going to be asked to take on, especially, well, I shouldn't say especially, for those of you with long memories, will also remember that, you know, years ago, the bus stop, which of course no longer exists, was put in front of our house. I respectfully suggest that we've given enough. I respectfully suggest that it can be done to have someone else do it. And I also respectfully suggest that that there will be discussion about the other multi-unit properties on North Ann Arbor Street, the village, I think it's Brecken Village. That is set very far back from the street. That is a whole different, the way I understand the thing is going to be, that's a much, much different setup, a much different look, and frankly, because of where it is, a much different traffic situation. So, I cannot tell you that I have millions of people storming the doors behind me that agree with everything I just said, but I can tell you that having talked to our neighbors and talked to people who live there, there's an awful lot of sentiment against this change in the zoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Appreciate your comments. Are there additional comments on agenda items, please?
My name is Ed Andrews. I'm Mr. Sims' neighbor. Have some of the same concerns that he has, and I have a question for the city. I'm a little ignorant about this whole project. Is it true that this project is supposed to be for single-parent type people?
Sir, we don't usually answer questions during the public comment period, but if you pose a question, we'll make sure it's answered during the actual
Because
discussion.
of Section 8. You can't answer that?
We'll answer it when we get to that particular item.
Well, I have the same concerns about the traffic pattern there, and it just, the entrance would have to be off of Saline Waterworks Road, and that is a pretty heavily traveled road. And, I watch people make the left off the Ann Arbor Saline Road, and as soon as they turn, they gun it down that road. I see problems there, and especially if we get across the road, another unit in there also, so you're going to have two different, on both sides of the roads entering into that. So, and it is going to affect our property values there. And like I said, it's a nice piece of property there. It looks very nice when you come into town, and I hate to see it go. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments, and we'll address some of your questions when we get to that agenda item. Are there additional comments on agenda items?
I'm actually Deborah Sims. My husband was just up here, but my neighbor caught me on the way out the door, and she gave me a letter to give to you. Now, this letter assumes that the rezoning has already taken place, so I don't know if you want me to read it. And she obviously didn't have copies so that I can give you all a copy, but I didn't know if I should give this to someone.
No, you can read, whatever your preference is, ma'am. If you'd like to read it, you can read it. If not, we can get it to the clerk and have copies made.
I'm fine with reading.
All right.
Okay. She lives at 868. Her name's Deborah Currit. My concerns regarding the rezoning of the property on the northwest corner of North Ann Arbor Street and Waterworks Road are twofold. First, I already have a hard time turning left into my driveway when heading southbound on North Ann Arbor Street because the left turn lane is only for use when turning west onto Waterworks Road. As a result, when I want to turn left, the cars behind me do not expect me to stop and blow their horn thinking I should be in the left turn lane. Perhaps we could post a sign in this area alerting drivers to watch for cars making a left turn from the right lane. In any case, if the new development on this corner has access on North Ann Arbor Street, it will only exacerbate this problem. I could foresee traffic turning south onto North Ann Arbor Street after looking for southbound traffic and pulling out without realizing there are vehicles stopped to turn left. I would encourage traffic to be routed onto Waterworks. Second, I am worried about low-income housing across the street from my home, decreasing my property value. If I cannot have a say in what type of development is placed here, I encourage the city to require berms and dense landscaping to shield the visibility of the property from the street. I think that the plantings on Woodland Drive across from Woodland Meadows are a perfect starting point. Thank you for your consideration, Deborah Currit.
Thank you. If you want to give that letter to the clerk, we'll make sure it's distributed. Thank you, ma'am. Additional citizen comments, Mrs. Hess?
Mary Hess on the odor study award for $98,000 and just close to $100,000. I guess I'm disappointed that when the bond was passed this spring for, $3.5 million, that the odor that has been talked about for years was not put into the study. And it's almost like the advertisement of the man who's checking the stairs for, eating wood, and the kid falls through the stairs. He says, "Oh, I don't fix it, I just check it." And there's another one that's doing a dentist thing. He said, "Yeah, you got a cavity. Are you going to fix it?" "No, I just check it." This has nothing to do with fixing the odor. $98,000 for finding out what's going on. I did also find that we have done a whole bunch of $500,000 into additional sludge building and taking in septic tank sludge. And that was one of the concerns a couple of years ago that I kept saying, is this possibly part of the additional odor? I think it's sad that all this money, and we have no idea how much it's really going to cost. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hess. Are there additional comments on agenda items? No, then we'll move on to the consent agenda. Thank you for your comments, by the way. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion.
Move to approve as submitted.
Thank you, Mr. Gearba. And was that seconded by Ms. Tahar?
Yes, it was.
Thank you, ma'am. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 16-199. This is health insurance renewal. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 8th, 2016 memo from City Manager Campbell and to approve or not to approve the Employee Health Care Committee recommendations.
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Thank you, Councilmember Seal. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tahar. I'll get you on the next one, Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes. Mr. Campbell, we did have a work meeting on this, I believe, a couple weeks back, so we've discussed the issue pretty thoroughly, but do you want to give an overview for those members of the public who are in attendance or who may be watching this meeting at a later date, and maybe also for council's benefit as well?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So you may recall when we met with Dave Hunsaker, who's here. So Dave, if you may want to come up for questions. From Cabinet Insurance, our city's third-party healthcare administrator. We talked about the recommendation from the Employee Health Care Committee, which is to remain status quo. A couple other important details. The overall increase is 15.27%, which is certainly on the high side, especially since the last couple of years we've seen actually reductions. But out of that 15.27%, because the city has currently adopted the hard cap, which is Public Act 152, which sets a ceiling for how much a public employer can pay towards employee health insurance. That is, the annual increase is 3.3%. So out of that 15.27%, the city would be responsible for 3.3%, and the remaining almost just under 12% would be responsibility of the employees to pick up that difference. So unless there's any questions for me, I don't know if David wanted to talk about some of the details, reference the proposed plans, which are the current plans.
Let's start with, are there any questions for our city manager? Mr. Garibald?
Accepting this tonight, will this have any impact on any of our other contracts that are currently in negotiation in terms of how those are negotiated?
No, they would not be. No.
Thank you.
If I may, you may recall, the last 3 years ago, we were able to negotiate into the contract that they would accept what the city provides.
Okay, I just want to make sure nothing that we do here may impact that. Thank you.
Good question. Additional questions for our city manager? David, thank you for being here tonight. Do you want to talk maybe briefly about the difference between the plans that the city will be offering?
As far as going from the current year to the renewal year.
Excuse me, sorry, David, you may want to push the button right there.
Yeah, the green light needs to be on.
Sorry, there it is.
You're on.
Apologize. Green means go. Okay, as far as the plans from current to 2017, basically the plans that we're offering are the same plans that we have in place right now. Obviously, there's a cost differential to that. We're offering one traditional PPO plan intended to try and mirror as close as possible to the PA 152 hard cap, as well as two HSA-style plans that would include paying the premiums for the employees plus some sort of contribution to the HSA accounts that are available, again, to mirror what the hard cap allows for. Nothing really dramatic as far as plan changes. In fact, we did look at options, and the Healthcare Committee overwhelmingly said to us that they would prefer to absorb additional cost rather than make a change.
Very good. We appreciate your ongoing work on this. Are there questions for our guest? Mr. Seal, please.
Mr. Hunter, could you perhaps explain for the public what it was in the health care plan that caused the dramatic rise this year in the premium?
Absolutely. So Blue Cross very quietly has reevaluated their underwriting processes for groups considered experience-rated contracts. An experience-rated contract basically looks at claims history, and it looks primarily at a recent claims history, and then it's got a component to it that goes back, I think, maybe even 10 years, where an underwriter will review how the plan's been running. Has it been doing better than or worse than expected? The city has actually done better over that time period than expected, and for that, we've been getting basically a special discount for it. With the new underwriting model, that credibility factor, was what they call it, basically disappears or becomes less important, and because of that, we saw a higher than expected increase, the 15.27.
Additional questions, Mr. Seal?
No, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Ms. Tahar and then Ms. Dillon.
Yes, just a request just to add to that information. The question might arise in someone's mind, why then are we not looking at other insurance providers? And you explained that to us in the work meeting, of course, but perhaps you could just
Yeah, absolutely.
say about that as well.
So to answer the question is, we did look at other carriers. Unfortunately, other carriers don't seem to be viable at this time, primarily because of underwriting restrictions on the number of retirees compared to active employees. We have a higher number than what just about every insurance company would consider acceptable, and therefore receive declinations on our request for proposal, which basically means we're, at the moment, I don't know if trapped is the right word, but we're with Blue Cross until that number changes.
Anything further, Ms. Tahar?
That's it, thank you.
Ms. Dillon?
That was actually one of my questions. The second was, at our work session, we had discussed possible payouts and other options. Were those explored any further?
Those are still in process. I have confirmed with Blue Cross, specifically if we think about the Medicare Advantage programs, that they will allow us to offer a PPO plan as well as an HMO. And if you remember, we wanted to have an interest in the PPO because we didn't want to expect that our retirees would necessarily stay right here. We have some actually living out of state already. So that's been approved as far as something we can do. I'm waiting on numbers for that, which I don't have for you at this time. I've confirmed that if retirees want to come or go, they would be allowed to switch plans. It's not the expectation that a snowbird, for example, would jump to the PPO for the winter months and then come back to Saline and have the HMO. That's not what the intention is for. If somebody is actively moving to a different location, say Kentucky or Texas or something along those lines. As far as the buyout goes, there's not a whole lot of progress in that area. I think that probably what we'll have to do is find a third party to make some sort of evaluation for us. I'm not quite sure where to go with that yet, but it is something that's being looked into.
Thank you.
Just to elaborate on that point, David, I appreciate the question, Ms. Dillon, and as you may recall from that work meeting, once our underwriter has collected the data and sufficient information, I will work with city staff to convene a work session, ideally sometime in December, possibly January, to consider how we can better manage retiree health insurance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rhodes, did you have a comment or question, sir?
A comment and perhaps a question. I've been approached by some retirees from the city to ask if they could be granted the option to purchase rec center memberships at the same cost that active duty members can. And on the surface, at least a little bit I know, it seems like that's a reasonable thing to do since we're now an experience-rated organization, and if our retirees can be a little bit healthier, then in theory we'll have fewer claims, and that might have an impact on our premiums. So I said that I would bring that up since they asked me.
Sure, well, and that's actually part of collective bargaining.
Yeah. You would make a comment right now?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just say that to that point, that's actually an item of collective bargaining.
Oh, okay. And to be considered under collective bargaining? It would be?
Possibly, but again, not discussing collective bargaining discussions in public, so.
Additional comments or questions? No? David, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your efforts. Any subsequent discussion? Mr. Gearbaugh.
I'm in favor of this year because we're not sure what's going to be happening in the coming year in terms of how healthcare could be seriously impacted from what comes out of Washington. As we have discussed in my concerns were the actual looking for advantages of other plans, including PPOs and the HMO for the retirees, and I think we've done our due diligence on that this year. And I agree that we need to be very proactive in looking at this in the next few months so that we provide plenty of lead time for our retirees should we have to move to something else or different. My hope is that whatever we provide will be the same as what we currently do, but it may be something that's more beneficial because we need something that will allow for a longer time and more, how I'd say, cost savings so that we know that not only do we have our liability associated with pensions, but we have our liability associated with retiree benefits, and that is growing exponentially every year. So whatever we do now is to attempt to try and protect whatever we have. This increase this year is definitely as a result of Blue Cross Blue Shield changing, and as Mr. Rose has agreed with me, and even my father, his Blue Cross Blue Shield tripled in terms of what he has to pay for a premium, so this is a hit across the board for all Blue Cross Blue Shield providers.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Additional comments or discussion? No, then we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by CO, seconded by Tahar, to acknowledge receipt and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Thank you again, David. We appreciate your time. We move on to new business item 16-200. This is wastewater treatment odor study award. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 2016 memo from City Superintendent Engineer Rubel and to approve or not to approve the Webster environmental proposal in the amount of $98,460 and to authorize or not authorize the agreement to be executed upon review and approval by the city attorney.
I'll move the motion with the one condition that it be changed to up to $98,000 because I'm not sure how that works, but we really have two phases to this contract.
Yep, okay. So let me just reread that so we're clear, Mr. Gearbaugh. To acknowledge receipt of the November 2016 memo from City Superintendent Engineer Rubel and to approve or not to approve, which of course you're saying to approve, the Webster environmental proposal up to $98,460 and to authorize the agreement to be executed upon review and approval by the city attorney.
Second.
You're still good with that, Mr. Gearbaugh?
Correct.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Rubel, do you want to make any comment in regards to this? You don't have to. Obviously, we had a very productive and thorough work meeting on this subject a week or so back, but we would welcome any remarks you have this evening.
Thank you. I think it's on. I anticipate there's probably going to be questions, and we'll treat myself and perhaps Brian Rubel, the Tetra Tech, and Mr. Fetchik, the deputy superintendent, probably try to come up with the answers to the questions to the odor study. In the action where it says the amount of we can put in not to exceed 98,460 because that's the terminology in the personal services agreement that we receive in this week from the attorneys.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if there's...
Yeah, I don't think there's anything problematic about the wording that Mr. Gearbaugh proposed. I'm fine with that. I don't think it contradicts in any way. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rubel. Are there questions for either Mr. Gary Rubel, Brian Rubel, or our Assistant Superintendent of the Wastewater Treatment Plant? Ms. Dillon, please.
On the proposal, there's this one line that says Tetra Tech to work as a sub-consultant. Do we have any estimate as to what their costs will be? Or is it part of these fees?
It's inside the agreement with Webster, and it's because of the response and being local, and when complaints do come in, they have a 30-minute window to respond to the complaints and check out what may or may not be the source of odors. Webster is really technical, we have experts who sample water and air at the facility mainly, and however, they need the local extension, plus they need the expertise of Tetra Tech because they have designed all of the new modern technology and operations of the plant so they can feed them all the technical information that they need to complete thorough review and analysis.
So So we will not be getting bills from Tetra Tech? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Gearbaugh?
Can I clarify on that? So the company will be contacting Tetra Tech to come make it a sample or something at the time something is discovered, if a complaint is made?
Sampling is being performed by remote power transporting as well as hands-on at the plant for the liquids and these gases. But one component of the study is to, when orders are reported, to check out, maybe the wind direction and try to ascertain what point, what location those orders may be coming from. And that helps detect more localized area of generation.
But who will be doing it? Will they actually be sending people out? Okay.
Correct.
So we're using Tetra Tech's people to do this?
Correct.
Okay.
And also from the technology standpoint of the operations of the chemistry of the plant.
Okay. Thank you.
Additional questions? Actually, I have one. Mark, would you mind coming to the podium? This is a pretty simple question. I want to frame it as a response to one of the comments that was made during the public comment period regarding outside waste and how that contributes, if it does at all, to any odor issues. Needless to say, you're well aware of this. Bob is well aware of this, as is Mr. Campbell and myself. I received a number of complaints from residents over the past 6-7 months regarding odor issues at the plant, including Mr. and Mrs. Roth. It's also my understanding that during that period of time, we were not accepting any outside waste at the plant.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So perhaps it's dubious at best to suggest that accepting outside waste is contributing in any way to ongoing odor issues.
Well, that's hard to speak to. I can say that we have not accepted any outside septic or any septic, and it's been close to a year.
Okay.
So in that time frame, we don't believe that would...
Contributing in any way. Okay, thank you, Mark, and I appreciate you being here this evening. Let me make a few comments. And many of the sentiments that were shared during the public comment period, I agree with. I regret that this analysis, this study is going to take as long as it will. I regret the cost of this analysis. More importantly, I regret that in the past, as it relates to mitigating odors, the city overpromised and underdelivered in terms of mitigating some of these problems. However, I think at this juncture, we know that many of the neighbors, many of the people in the vicinity are experiencing odor issues on close to a daily basis. We need to do a very thorough analysis of what the problem is. We need to have conclusive evidence as to what the problem is, and then we need to move forward to rectify that. And so I will make this promise to my constituents and those that are in the audience this evening, as well as my council colleagues. Once the recommendations come back, I will work with any and all stakeholders to move expeditiously to resolve the problems and deficiencies that they identify. Again, this is not a perfect solution to what has been a problem that has persisted for decades, but I do think it's a solid proposal. I'm hoping we get some compelling data and we can be pointed in the right direction as to what we need to do to resolve these odor issues. And I appreciate staff's work on this. You've moved quickly to bring a proposal and a recommendation to City Council, and I applaud that. Mr. Seal.
I just wanted to add one thing to your comments, Mr. Mayor, which I find very gratifying. One of the reasons this is taking so long is because we want to make sure that we test during both cold and warm weather. We only had one bidder on this project, and that person has recommended that they do an analysis during both times. And that's the reason for lengthening the project, so that having to pay this high price, hopefully, I'm no expert when it comes to mitigating these kinds of smells. Hopefully, they will provide us the answers of how to proceed correctly in mitigating this by doing sampling both during warm and cold weather, which they indicated to us they thought would most thoroughly then analyze the problem. Thank you.
Thank you for those additional comments, Mr. Seal. Ms. McClellan?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo some of those comments. The work meeting, I think it was It was very impressive to hear their track record of doing this kind of work in other locations and using the science to get to the core of the issue and not just kind of guessing our way to some kind of a fix, but to actually take the science in various places, atmospheric and on-site and lots of different things to try and get this fixed. And I do regret that it costs so much money, but looking forward to having some resolution to this. As someone that lives in a neighborhood that's affected quite often from this, looking forward to being able to open my windows as well. So I'm definitely for this.
Very good. Thank you, Councilwoman. Any additional comments?
Just real quick.
Yes, please.
Just to clarify, and Mr. Roth had mentioned this to me the other day, we did have testing for the sludge as it was coming online, but it was tested, so that has not been the case that we have not used it at all this entire year. It's been used once, I understand, for testing, so just to clarify.
When was it used, out of curiosity?
We did for testing purposes on the new sludge system, or septic system. We had one hauler come in, so we could run the equipment through and check it out.
How long did that take, though?
An hour at most.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify so that no one felt that they hadn't been heard. I think we as a council are very much pushing for this to make sure that this is resolved. It's not just any individual, but all of us know that this is a concern, has been. And since the three of us on this side do live fairly close to that and smell it every day, and I've really smelled it in the last week or so, we need this fixed.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Any additional comments? No, then we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by CO to acknowledge receipt and to approve, noting the change in verbiage up to is added before the $98,460. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We move on to the ethics policy 16201. Again, as I stated earlier, at this time I will entertain a motion to acknowledge receipt of the ethics policy.
Move to acknowledge receipt.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. All right, let me frame this very quickly, my friends. The copy that is in your packet this evening has some highlighted areas that we want to clean up, and so we'll submit to you a revised copy before the next council meeting. Ms. Tahar, Mr. Rhodes, and myself, the ones who drafted this, asked for any feedback, any suggestions that you may have. To my knowledge, Ms. Tahar, Mr. Rhodes, we have not received any to date, but we may have some this evening. Is that correct?
Well, sort of.
Okay.
Mr. Gearbaugh did mention to me that he had one or two suggestions, which I asked. There was a glitch somewhere in the email universe this week. I asked him for his if he still had comments and didn't get an answer, which he sent.
Okay.
So
Just one of the items we were. Yeah.
So, and other than that, there were no comments, but at this point, we could still discuss comments.
Mr. Gearbaugh, you have some suggestions. What, are you on page 1 or page 2?
Page 2, but I'm not sure where it fits in both cases. One was on number 14, where we state council members should be attentive and refrain from side discussions or other distractions, such as cell phones, and so forth, those type of things. I think
Stick on that real quick, Mr. Gearbaugh. I'm assuming that seems pretty cut and dry and reasonable. Is there any objection to that addition? No objection. Change will be made without objection.
Thank you.
Did you have another one, sir?
No, I believe that was the main one.
That was it? Okay. Any other suggested changes? Any questions about any clauses?
Just to clarify that one,
Please.
I believe that we should be able to use our electronic devices if we need to look up something. It's just more other distractions and things, so forth. So I think that's just appropriate to do it this time.
Yep, I agree. Well, if there's nothing further, then Ms. Tahar, Mr. Rhodes, and myself will remove the highlighted sections and those little boxes that say new and old. That can be, those can be removed, and we'll add the additional verbiage. And then this will be considered as unfinished business at our next council meeting a week from today, unless there are objections. No? Very good, okay. Well, then there's a motion on the floor by Rhodes, seconded by Dillon, to acknowledge receipt of the ethics policy. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 16-202. This is Linden Square Water and Sewer Rates Resolution. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the October 24th, 2016 memo from City Superintendent Engineer Rubel, and to approve or not to approve the resolution regarding water and sewer rates for Linden Square Phase 2, and to authorize or not authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the resolution.
Move to acknowledge receipt and to approve.
Thank you, Mayor.
And authorize.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilman Seal. Mr. Rubel, do you care to make any comment this evening?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry about the speaker the first time. Mr. Mackey Woodruff is here, and his mother is one of the Reinders family, and he is the one who drafted the letter of request for the second phase of Reinders, Linden Square. A similar letter had been submitted with Phase 1 from Dennis Reinders, and virtually it's the same request as was placed before you for Phase 1. And we actually amended the ordinance to reflect that elderly housing has less of a demand on the system than regular residential by quite a bit, and that the common factor used is the 0.3 REUs, as was shown through some analysis and past uses and other projects in other communities. So we amended the ordinance to that effect. But the 0.3 CU is not in the ordinance. The 0.3 REUs is a factor for that type of housing in general. But certainly Section 94.3 gives you the ability to use and allow the 0.3 REUs for elderly housing. The charts I had provided on attachment A show still what their fees would be for water and sewer. For instance, the Phase 1 fee, which had more units, was $99,000, and with the 0.3 REUs for Phase 2, their fee for connection charges would be roughly $89,000. So it's still a substantial fee involved. So.
Thank you, Mr. Rubel. Are there questions for our city engineer? Mr. Gearbaugh.
Do the connection fees reflect our change in fees that may take effect next year? I'm not sure when they're planning to occupy.
I'm not sure when they plan to, they're under construction, they've got quite a long ways along, so I imagine the occupancy would probably somewhere around, around that time, the end of June or something.
Yeah, I would assume around May, June.
Yeah.
Okay, so if it happens within this fiscal year, then these fees are appropriate, but if
Right.
it happens after July 1, then the increase will occur.
Right, and I did note that they would pay the fees in effect at the time, because that's the way the code's written.
Just verify that. Thank you.
Additional comments, or actually questions right now? Any additional questions for Mr. Rubel? No? How about comments? Do you have a question?
I do. I just
Please.
want to piggyback on what Mr. Gearbaugh just said.
Absolutely.
So based on what you had said, that the owner is required to pay the rate at the time of occupancy, so then the $88,000 is anytime between now and July 1? And then do we have a number of what it would be after July 1? Or are you looking for it to just stay at 88?
Well, we haven't really adopted that rate. We talked about it at a work meeting, but that's not been adopted yet. But the council would adopt it before July 1. So there was a chart presented at the work meeting on the connection fees, and we had it showed incremental 5-year buy-in or change.
Yes.
Yeah, and so it would be, we didn't approve or disapprove that. I mean, council agreed in concept that that's what we would do.
But it would need to come back as an action item.
Right, it has to come back as an action item. I mean, you could do it when we review the fee book in January, February, if you like. We could do that.
So my point being that if we do increase the fees, will it jump, or are we setting it now at the $88,000?
No, it would be whatever's in effect at the time of occupancy.
Just clarifying, thank
Yeah.
you.
Additional comments or questions? No? Then if there's nothing further, we're going to proceed to vote. We do have did you want to say anything, or do you think that Mr. Rubel covered it pretty well?
I think he covered it well.
Very good.
See if there were any additional questions.
Okay, well, we appreciate you being here. If there's nothing further, we're going to proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by Rhodes, seconded by CO to acknowledge receipt, to approve, and to authorize. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 16-203. This is 911 North Ann Arbor Street rezoning, proposed ordinance number 789. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the November 10th, 2016 memo from Planning Commission and to approve and adopt or not to adopt ordinance number 789, an ordinance to change the zoning at 911 North Ann Arbor Street, northwest corner of Ann Arbor, Saline Road, and Saline Waterworks Road from PB Professional Business to R3 Multifamily Residential.
Move to acknowledge receipt. Second.
Moved by Tahar to acknowledge receipt, seconded by Councilmember Gearbaugh. Mr. Rubel, do you want to make a comment on this, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The developer of the proposed project, if the rezoning is approved, is Mr. Danny Very, and he's here tonight. As I mentioned at the Planning Commission meeting, and two members of council happened to preside on that, Danny began here several years ago by finishing out Torwood after the prior developer had some difficulties with continuing the project. So Danny picked it up, finished out, made some very nice homes in Torwood. And then he built two homes in the area, one on Detroit Street and Spring Street near City Hall. And then a year ago received approval, and then that was also on a rezoning, and built, or is almost, was got quite far along on Cypress Ridge, 27 homes there. I think 19 have been built or underway, permit-wise. And and that's on property that was reclaimed after Holton School was demolished. And this project, if it's successful, goes through Planning Commission next, of course, and he has to actually run through all the requirements that would be needed by the Planning Commission to approve it for up to 16 units. That's what's proposed. May not be end up what is approved, but at least that's the concept going into it. I can respond to any questions you may have regarding the Planning Commission reports and action if you have any at this time. And Mr. Berry's here to answer questions too.
Very good. Danny, we appreciate you being here. I'm going to bring you up in just a second to address some of the concerns that were raised during the public comment period that I think you can address. Mr. Rubel, before I turn it over to my colleagues, I'm looking at a memo here, and you and I spoke earlier today. The parcel's current zoning, professional business district, actually doesn't prevent the construction of single-family homes. Is that correct? Am I understanding the ordinance correctly that says, in fact, this is point 1, that all uses permitted in professional business district are similar to R1C?
Correct. The planner's report, my report, went to the Planning Commission based upon the request and the essentials of the rezoning provisions, meeting the criteria for rezoning per the Article 15, or Article 17, I mean. And the Planning Commissioners considered the master plan, and somehow, because the prior development that did not come to fruition was the proposed real estate office and some tenant spaces, somehow the object became, or the topic became, that this was intended to be professional business. But that was just the one endeavor. If you look at the code itself, under permitted uses in the professional business district, the number 1 use, it states, is all uses permitted in the R1C. The number 2 use permitted in the R1 in the PB is office buildings occupied by a certain number of professions that fall into certain categories. So I followed up on that somewhat because I thought maybe the question would come up here. And the fact that since the PB allows R1C development in it, and it's a straight allowance too, it's not special approval or anything, that in R1C districts, the density is one lot to cover 7,800 square feet. And then if you put that into the area of the lot, which is 2.51 acres, the number of R1C units that would be allowed on the parcel maximum would be 14, which is very similar to what's being proposed by converting it to the R3. Now, the rationale for the R3 is not that it's mainly a density concern. It's the fact that he has not single-family homes, but attached, like most all condominiums, even, Cypress, Curtis Park Bluffs, Risden Heights, Fairdean, and all the new developments are attached condominiums versus detached. And so in order to get the 4 units together, you need the R3. The R2 won't work for that either, and R2 is also a permitted use after special approval.
Yeah, I just wanted to be very clear for the public's benefit that the reason for the change is to allow the developer to construct multi-family dwellings. But again, if your goal is to prevent residential development on this parcel, the current zoning doesn't satisfy your point of view. You would need the zoning changed regardless. Again, if your goal was to prevent residential development.
Someone could buy it right now and propose residential, and that is a permitted use in all PB zones. Residential is a permitted use. We have that in a number of locations already now. On East Michigan Avenue, as well as on North Ann Arbor Street, there's single-family buildings in PB.
Very good. Questions for Mr. Rubel? Ms. Dillon, please.
Okay, first, can you what's the maximum occupancy for R2 versus R3?
What is the difference in density?
Maximum occupancy, yes.
For those. In the R2, which is actually houses together, because it has a greater, I think it has a greater demand because they want more yard space for the 2 together. You could get 11 units on there if it was R2.
Okay.
But then he would have to go through special approval with both the planning commission and the council to go to the R2.
Okay, and then R3?
R3, he would propose 16 units.
But what is the maximum?
I forget what the maximum was. It's in the Carlisle Wortman report that's attached here.
11 to 18 units per
Okay.
acre, I think.
All right, theoretical is 11 to 18, so you can see the R1 would put him right in the middle of that.
Okay.
And he's proposing 16 if that's possible. That's just a concept. In reality, he had proposed, started out with 31 at Cypress Ridge and ended up being 27 because you have to put in amenities and other features and elements required of site plans.
And what's the difference between an R3 and an R3A?
Basically density and also some yard setbacks or some differences in yard setbacks.
Okay. I have a couple other questions. Hang on, give me 1 second. Traffic. The report seemed like it kind of contradicted itself. It first said that the amount of traffic generated by a single-family home is approximately 10 trips per day. And so then you just, realistically, you do the math of 16 times 10. You think if these are all homes. But then you're saying that that's not going to be an impact later on in this report. So I'm kind of concerned about the traffic, because that is a serious increase in traffic in that area.
Yeah, we have never experienced any traffic issues with any small developments like this. We've got, like I say, Curtis Park Bluffs with 17 units on Monroe Street, and you've got 27 units up at Curtis Park Bluffs. We ran through some basic numbers with that, and that's more units in here. And neither of those showed any significant impacts on traffic. And Risden Heights also, it's 11 units on Henry Street, which is heavily traveled. We don't anticipate any issues with that either.
Okay, it just didn't seem like that's how it was worded in the reports. The topography of that parcel, is it conducive with doing this type of a project?
Right, there was a site plan approved for that, but it was a commercial building,
Right.
professional offices, and they've made it work for a number of tenants, and a parking lot and stormwater retention.
But that's a totally different project.
Right, but it still occupied the space.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's one building versus four. So if we change this, what assurances do we have that this project isn't going to morph into something else and become an apartment complex? I mean, once we're opening the door on changing the zoning,
Well, I would have to still go to Planning Commission, and meet the criteria of development for that. I think, there's height restrictions. Apartment buildings usually can't meet those height requirements. In certain instances, if they want to overbuild, they'd probably only be able to get in the 16 units. They still have to use the land, still have to have the same elements of parking, stormwater retention, setbacks, yard setbacks from the front yards and side and rear. Still have to have the same amenities. Mr. Very could probably answer that question better than I. Even though it's a condominium look, it'll look like regular one-story condominiums, but it will be, it will have one landowner and operated and managed by one landowner.
which we have no control over because it's not a city-owned piece of property.
Right, it's
So once
the
we
same
make
as
this
probably
choice,
a
then there's no
right.
going back.
That happens in just about any instance on any private property that's owned.
Thank you.
Yep.
Additional questions for Mr. Rubel? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Hart.
Yes, I have a number of questions, but Ms. Dillon has touched on a couple of them. I have a question about there's a reference here to in the report from Carlisle Wortman to the master plan and to this, the site is in an area that's designated as the North Residential Sub-Area.
Correct.
Not being on the Planning Commission, could you tell me what that is and what that means? I'm assuming it's describing the context of this particular piece of property, but,
Right.
so could you elaborate on that?
Right, starting with the last master plan recreation, back in 2009 to 11, that the trend in planning was to not look at just corridors and little neighborhoods, but to put it into larger neighborhoods and have it display the characteristics of a larger area. And also the trend is going into more of a mixed use within neighborhoods, not making everything like one type of, like all your factories are here, all your businesses here, all your residents, just all the blocks of uses are separated, but there should be some mixed uses for the old town style, And so with that trend beginning in 2009, the neighborhood, or this sub-area, was looked at, so you could have a blend of uses in some sub-areas, recognizing that the core of that sub-area is residential. So that's why that one was labeled that sub-area was residential in the northwest area.
Okay, so how big is that
It's fairly large because the whole city is basically only 5 sub-areas. We have the main corridor on US 12, and then you've got the northeast, northwest, southwest, southeast, and central. So there's about 6 sub-areas.
So just to make sure I understand, so the fact that this area is designated as residential doesn't define every single use in the area as being residential?
Correct. The master plan is sort of a vision or a guide as to where you are now and where you might be in 5 years. That's why every 5 years it has to be reviewed and updated and changed. And, we talked with the planners about just this one lot and why, what direction we may go here in the future, and that they recognize that the current master plan we're going through, they can actually, they're in the final revisions of it, but they can actually have it reflect that this particular area in this corridor may be considered for, not just strictly one use as PB or business, but for residential. But as you can see, the zoning code already defines it as residential is a permitted use in the PB, so that pretty much covered it anyway.
So,
Please.
yes, so my other concern was also about density. So, assuming that the proposed or the imagined use of this property would be 14 or 16 units, both numbers occur here.
Right.
But I take it from what you said that 16 is actually what's intended. That if we rezone to R3, many more than 16 are theoretically possible under the zoning, and there isn't really any way to control that. Is that correct?
Well, I don't think it would be many more because they have to meet all the amenities of a site plan. They have to have areas for parking and yard setbacks, stormwater measures. So the maximum basically is not going to be met unless they could build like a 3-story. They would need a variance for that.
And does the presence of wetland on the property restrict how much can be put there as well?
Does the what? Excuse me?
The presence of wetland on the property restrict?
Yeah, I mean, they do have some fragile areas on the western part that does restrict it. Plus, there's an easement, a 60-foot easement on the north side, and we went into this at quite a bit of extent at the Planning Commission. So the Planning Commissioners understood that basically his building envelope or any of a multiple family is pretty well restricted by both the landform on the west, which is wooded and a ravine sort of going down into wetlands, and then actually there's a 60-foot city utility easement on the north end. So when the site plan comes in, anything that affects the easement, the city has some prerogative and some control over how basically a large part of the north part of the project is being developed and used. So we do have some mechanism there for, sort of shaping, how it's going to look, how it's going to be used. So there are some safeguards in there. One of the handouts I gave the Planning Commission there at the meeting for supplemental information was a comparison of dwelling, of some densities for some similar projects. For instance, Risden Heights, they have 11 units on 1.47 acres, and they were faced with similar challenges with grades and yard setbacks and so forth, and it's an irregular shaped lot also. And in reality, the most they could get on it was 7.5 dwelling units per acre. And in this case, what Mr. Very is proposing is 6.4, which is less than that. And then Curtis Fairdean, which is on the city-owned piece of land, by the way, was approved at 30 units on 3.97 acres. Turns out to be, that was rezoned to R3A. Maybe that's why Mrs. Dillon brought that up, but that was rezoned to R3A. Also, it is adjacent to R1C zone like this would be, and that has 7.7 dwelling units per acre, which is more than what Mr. Very is proposing if he gets the 16 units. So he'd be less than those two that were rezoned and approved.
I'll stop for now, thank you.
Additional questions for Mr. Rubel? Mrs. McClellan and then Mr. Rhodes?
Just curious what the property across from Saline Waterworks is zoned at? I know that property is up for sale as well, the house on the corner there.
Right, the Escott property is actually in Lodi Township,
Okay.
so it'd be zoned agricultural as a holding zone there.
Just
But
curious.
if it comes into the city, it comes in as R1A.
Okay.
Mr. Rhodes?
I don't have a question for him, I had some comments I was going to make.
Okay, let me bring Mr. Rubel, thank you for your analysis. Mr. Very, would you like to come forward at this time and make some comments? There have been a litany of issues and concerns articulated that I hope you can address. Obviously, you're free to share whatever it is you deem appropriate, but in particular, I want you to address the density of your development and how the easement, wetlands, and topography affect that. Second, a concern was raised during the public comment period about whether this development is going to be geared towards low-income individuals and whether it's going to be Section 8. And then finally, what assurances can you offer in terms of, council wants to make certain that what we see if this project comes to fruition is very similar to what you're presenting today.
Absolutely.
So I didn't mean to bombard you with
No, it's
questions, but those items should be addressed.
Council, I appreciate taking the time here tonight. I want to give you a little history. First, our single-family stuff, because you've seen that, but we also have an apartment rental branch of our company. We currently have 96 units that we own in Pittsfield Township, 2 different developments. We're currently building one in Plymouth Township. All of our rents in all of our communities range from $1,400 to $1,700 a month. Section 8 is not even remotely in our wheelhouse. It is nothing that we would ever consider. We primarily market to, obviously, a young professional with the style of townhouses that we have. Most, if not, I'd say at least 60% of them are either university or hospital employees in those 2 projects. In the one in Plymouth, we're getting primarily young professionals that are working in the auto industry. What we've encountered through these 3 projects is there is a tremendous demand for a ranch, 1-story unit for, I'm going to call them empty nesters, baby boomers. In our demographic of our other 2 projects, yes, we do have a lot of young professionals, but we do have a lot of divorced or widowed or single fathers with their kids, but none of them are Section 8. That is not at all what we do. We have niches in everything we do, both the single family and in the rental community, and that is exactly what our intention is here. It is not Section 8. If in the narrative that was misconstrued, that is 100% inaccurate. I know you can't put a condition on a rezoning, but if you want to make that a condition on the site plan, you have my 100% blessing, because that is nothing that I want to even touch. So I hope I made that very clear. As far as the site plan itself, yes, as far as there is a small little pocket of wetlands that it's already been flagged. Mr. Suravel had it flagged when he came in 2005. We went ahead and updated it to make sure that it was still conducive to that drawing, which it is. It hasn't grown because it's basically in a bowl. So it's stayed confined to that area. I think we impact with our road only about 5 feet of it by 30 feet long. So it's a minimal impact. By the DEQ standards, you are allowed to encroach on 1/3 of an acre without having mitigation or anything involved. I think we're encroaching on 1,800 square feet at the most, because we have to do a little grading. I forgot what your 3rd one was. The first thing you said.
Well, density, Section 8, and then
Okay.
sort of, I guess it's really an issue of reputation and history that, what you're proposing in terms of look and feel is what we're going to ultimately see if this project comes to fruition.
The picture, I'm not sure if you guys have the picture that Gary has in front of me. It's a single story, so we're not building up. It's 1 story tall. Probably 9-foot ceilings, but I'm not 100% sure yet. It's still in the design stage, but 8-foot ceilings or 9-foot ceilings, and then your regular roof line that a ranch unit would have. We do have, this is actually the same product that I showed you guys when we were talking about the Maple Road property. Still making little tweaks to it. I never have built this project before, so I don't have it finalized to give to you. But for the most part, that's what we're looking at. On the property itself, we have it set up as 2-unit, 4-unit, 6-unit buildings just based on the topography. We will have 4 units that will actually have basements. They will be walkout basements because of the topography. The other units will be slab on grade, so those won't have basements. I have been scouring every community to try to find property to do this. There's another company that came in out of, I believe it was Ohio, that has built a similar product. Their brand is Redwood in Howell, in Westland, I'm sorry, not Westland, Canton, and one other community I can't recall. They have waiting lists of seniors wanting to get in these places. It's a great product, and a dire need for it. There is. Most apartments are stairs, they're 2 floors, and I almost hate to say the word apartment because they're really condos that I'm just maintaining ownership to. That's exactly what I did in Pittsfield. I built condos, but I own them all. So that's the difference. It's not an apartment style living at all. It's a home living.
Very good. Are there questions for the petitioner? Mr. Seal?
Mr. Berry, could you enlighten us about where your projects in Pittsfield are located?
Yeah, absolutely.
Give us an
Yeah,
idea.
right on the corner of Michigan Avenue and Platte Road. It's called Blue Heron Point. It was a development that was started, I believe, in '01 by Centex Homes. They got just under halfway through in '05, and then the market collapsed. So the property remained vacant. I acquired that through a transaction with another builder, and we built all the rest of that development out. So that's right across from Township Hall.
Is that in the southeast?
Southeast corner. So the front half, or what would be in this case the south half, are all condos. The north half are all ours. And if you look carefully, you can see we did a slight differential in the brick and the siding to differentiate it, but it's very subtle. So those are ours. Those are 64 there. And then on the the east side of Carpenter Road, just north of Michigan Avenue, we have 32 new townhomes that we just built. Different style, they don't look like those at all. On the south side of Clover Lane, just west of Carpenter. I'm sorry, east of Carpenter, I keep saying west. So cross over 23, go north on Carpenter, it'll be on your right-hand side just before you go over 94. And then in Plymouth, I don't know if you want me to tell you where those are. Okay. Too far.
Additional questions for the petitioner?
I don't know if it's for the petitioner, maybe for Gary, but traffic-wise, are you thinking entrance off of Ann Arbor Saline Road or off of Waterworks?
Yeah, I could. The prior site plan had an approved driveway off of Ann Arbor or Saline Waterworks Road, and it's already been built, the entrance there. And so it was set back at a certain point where it would be out of the influence of the intersection for the turn lane as you're heading east towards Ann Arbor Street. And so at that point, you know, that portion of the traffic study indicated that exiting there was okay, and there shouldn't be a problem with this project either.
Do you have a follow-up, Ms. McClellan?
No.
No. Mr. Gearbaugh?
Just a question for density again for Gary. The current zoning under the R1, how many buildings could be built considering lots, the topography and so forth right now? Because under the multifamily, I see on the original plan that was to Planning Commission, had additional parking and so forth. That would not be necessarily required in this type of zoning as it currently is, because you'd have street parking and so forth. How many units could be built on here, assuming the restrictions on the lot as is?
Well, there would have to be still like a road and then lots on both sides, yard setbacks, but for R1C, you only need 60-foot wide lots. I don't know how long this parcel is, site plan wise, but all you would need is 7 times 60. You know, you just would need 7 times 60, yeah, that's 420 feet. Yeah, you only need, if it was 420 feet long, you can get 6 lots or 7 lots, you know, on each side of a street, and then you'd have your R1C lots.
So potentially you could do a similar type of thing. It would just be individually owned by their company homes.
Right, and with the PUD ordinance we have now, and knowing the character of the land with the landform on the west and the easement encroachment, that he might even ask for a PUD, and then he'd be given extra allowances and waivers for even more compact, so.
Yeah, and that was one of my
Yeah.
comments that I had made at, and not understanding that the R1C at our planning commission, and I think
Yeah.
that was one of the reasons why I didn't think we may necessarily need to rezone it if we could use our PUD, which we just put in place.
Any other questions? Gentlemen, thank you very much. Oh, you had one more, Mr. Hart?
Well, so I was looking at my notes, so could Mr. Gearbach repeat his point? I lost it. I'm gonna, sorry.
I think the biggest concern at Planning Commission, when they looked at it, and not necessarily from different opinions on there, two of the individuals that voted no were concerned about it remaining professional business, because then they feel that there is a need for that type of property in town. And those are our long-term individuals that have been on the Planning Commission. So they're concerned. My concern was from the standpoint of, we've been doing a lot of spot zoning. And that spot zoning, without reviewing our master plan and having that in place, puts us at risk, despite what I believe our attorney will continue to say. And then when I looked at this piece, and I was saying, well, and I was thinking professional business only, I didn't realize when Mr. Rubel mentioned, yes, we can do the residential under it, because, yeah, that makes consistent with what we've done in the past. If we could do a PUD with what's there and the consideration, there is no rezoning, it's allowable to be used on that property, so we're giving the owner of it to do what it is. It just may not be in the same setup of multiple buildings, large buildings or whatever in a condo approach. It would be separate individuals, and it would be consistent with what's already currently there, how it's zoned, and potentially could be handled the same way.
What are your comments on that, Mr. Berry?
I won't proceed.
Okay.
I want a multifamily community like this that I can retain ownership to. I don't, I've got hundreds of single-family lots. I don't need any more of those.
Fair enough. Additional questions? No? Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Why don't you hang tight in the event that there is something else that comes up that needs to be addressed. I believe there's a motion on the floor moved by Tahar, seconded by Gearbach, to acknowledge receipt of the memo from the Planning Commission dated November the 10th, 2016. If there's no additional discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. The next motion will be a motion to approve and adopt or not to adopt ordinance number 789, an ordinance to change the zoning of 911 North Ann Arbor Street, northwest corner of Saline Ann Arbor Road and Saline Waterworks Road, from PB Professional Business to R3 Multifamily Residential.
I'm going to move to approve and adopt.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Seal. Discussion. Mr. Rhodes, as the mover, do you want to begin?
I would, thank you very much. It was helpful listening to the back and forth here, all the comments and the information that came not only from council members, the applicants, city staff, and from the residents in the area who came forward. I'm supporting this rezoning for several reasons, one of which is the fact that it addresses Objective 3 of Goal 4 of the strategic plan, which this council has adopted. And that objective is to expand housing stock, and this certainly does that. Also, it provides an opportunity for 16 more families, potentially 16 more families, to become part of our community. And I think that's important. We have a reputation as being a welcoming community, and I want to make sure that we continue to do that. Thirdly, that particular site has housing on 3 sides of it already. And lastly, this kind of a general comment, because we're pretty much built out now as a community, it's almost impossible to do anything that doesn't impact somebody in the area. And that's unfortunate, but I don't know how else to do things. So I am supporting this proposal.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes. Mr. Seal, would you like to comment, sir?
Yes, the reason I am also supporting this is because I believe our experience with Mr. Berry in this community has been very successful. Mr. Berry has delivered a quality product. When Mr. Berry stands before us and says that he has no plan whatsoever in putting this in the Section 8 housing stock, I'd take that to the bank. And I'm familiar with the other 2 projects he's described in Pittsfield Township. Both of those, I think, are upscale apartments. They're not the typical apartment building we think of. And I think this fills kind of a middle niche between private home ownership and what we think of as, at least I think of when I hear apartments, of the old student apartments in Ann Arbor or places like that. This is more of a condo-style building if he succeeds in providing the same kind of a product he did out there in Pittsfield Township. And I think for us to attract that kind of a middle level, professional, young person, empty nesters, is the kind of housing stock we want to provide in this community, especially in a place like that as it comes into town. And that's the reason I would continue to support this.
Very good. Additional comments, Ms. McClellan?
Yeah, I appreciate as well the back and forth discussion about this. I think, like Mr. Seo said, that the bringing in more housing is a good thing, and I know I have talked to quite a few people who are, and not only Mr. Verdi said this, but just quite a few people in and around town about the opportunity to live in a ranch style, and there's so few opportunities for that in town that I know a lot of seniors that I've talked to that are looking to have somewhere that they can be on one floor and easy to access their living space is going to be very important going forward. So I am in support of this. I am concerned. I will echo some of the residents' concerns about traffic. And I hope that the study that they will be doing can make sure that they're going to be able to get to their homes, and also the people that are going to be living in this new area will also be impacted from that traffic. So I'm interested in making sure that that's workable for everyone as well. So.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Additional comments, Ms. Dillon and then Mr. Har.
I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to talk with us about this. And my concern does not lie in this project. My concern lies in if this project were to not succeed, we've now rezoned that property and what could happen with it at that point. I know you're not interested in making a Section 8 housing, but once we've opened the door to that on that property, should you choose not to proceed, we've already rezoned that property. And yes, we could go back and flip the coin again and zone it back to something else, but I don't really think that's the practice the city wants to be in. So that's where my concern lies.
Mr. Har?
Yes, I had a number of concerns coming in. I want to say, first of all, one of which was not the fact that Mr. Verdi was involved, because like Mr. Seo, I've appreciated the quality of his work and his relationship with the city in the past. And one of my concerns, the concern about traffic, I think that I would hope that any traffic study would involve looking at perhaps a redesign of how Ann Arbor Street, North Ann Arbor Street works, just based on the residents' comments, that there might be some improvements that could be made there that would help them, as well as accommodating some increased inhabitants in this area. Just doing the arithmetic, under the current zoning, it's technically possible to put 12 and a half houses on this size of property in that spot anyway. So I think that an additional 4 units is probably not a huge change in what the traffic might be if the property were developed as it could be now under current zoning. I think that enough of my concerns have been alleviated so that I can support this.
Thank you, Mr. Har. Mr. Gearbow, do you have comments?
Yeah, just a couple. My concern has been with our master planning and approach, and having been on the Planning Commission for many, many years, understanding the concerns that we do need some properties in our city to address all the uses that we need. When this was first discussed with me from the mayor's point of view, I was understanding that it was going to be something similar to what was put on the old Houghton property and not necessarily to be a condo development and so forth. So that was why I was looking forward to that and actually looking at a PUD, because that would have allowed additional and more opportunities for how that property would be developed. From my perspective, I still am on the point that we have done a lot of rezoning in the last year and a half in areas that potentially our master plan may not have said that, and I think this is a concern. And until we've addressed our master plan, which right now is currently under review and could be finished in the next couple of months, I think we're kind of putting the cart before the horse. So from my perspective, I won't be supporting it at this point. I don't have a problem with it being residential, but I feel that it's appropriately zoned at this point, considering our master plan.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Well, I don't want to beat this dog to death, but let me share a few sentiments. Clearly, the petitioner has, and I suspect will continue to have, an outstanding reputation in Southeast Michigan. As Mr. Rhodes indicated, not only does this grow our tax base, but also expands and diversifies our housing stock, which I hope is a goal and objective shared by all of my colleagues at the dais. In addition to that, I think that the proposal and request is practical. I think that it makes sense. I voted for it last Wednesday at the Planning Commission meeting. I will be voting for it again. I think that many of the concerns that were articulated this evening from residents of the public and from neighbors in the area, I think are well-founded, and I respect those. And I think many of those can be addressed, assuming this passes, I think many of those can be addressed during the planning process, both the preliminary and final site plan approval. I want to talk, though, for just a moment on a broader and I think more important issue, which is the economy, I think, is still very fragile and very anemic, although there are new signs of life. And I also think, as it relates to this project and also some of the recent developments that we have reviewed and approved as a council, that they're indicative of a very good and positive trend, of good momentum. And I would also remind my colleagues and the public that there are a great many communities throughout Michigan, not just Southeast Michigan, but throughout the state, who would be begging for this type of investment, this type of development. I think it's positive momentum. I think it's a sign of progress. And again, it expands our housing stock, diversifies our tax base, which ultimately helps the entire community. So again, I think this is a pragmatic, reasonable proposal. I support this. I hope that the developer continues to make investments and inquires about parcels in this community, because as I've stated before from this dais and at numerous public events, I think smart strategic growth is in this community's best interest, and when it's managed and handled properly, I think it can result in something that's beneficial for all of us. So like many of my colleagues, I will be supporting this rezoning request. Is there anything further? No, then we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by Rhodes, seconded by CO, to approve and to adopt. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Show of hands on the nays. I think it's 2. Yep. Ayes have it, and the motion passes. Thank you. We proceed now to the discussion portion of our agenda. First up is commission, committee, and task force reports from council members. Ms. McClellan, do you have one?
Yes, just a note for the Youth Council and the Parks and Recreation are teaming tomorrow night, at 7 o'clock for a teen forum to discuss lots of things for teenagers in relation to the parks. So that's, if you would like to attend, any of my council members, fellow council members would like to attend, I'm sure that they would love to have you, but looking forward to a vibrant evening of ideas and discussion.
Excellent. Thank you. Additional commission, committee, or task force reports? No? How about reports or other announcements? Mr. Seal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to let the public know that the Saline Lindenberg group has finally fixed the dates for our visit in 2017 to Lindenberg, Germany. We will be taking a maximum of 30 people with us on this trip. So first come, first served. We're going to actually be taking reservations at our January meeting. It will be held here at City Hall at a date to be announced. think it's usually the second Sunday in January. That further information to come on that. The actual dates, we're going to depart Saline on September the 26th, arriving in Lindenberg, Germany on September the 27th, and then returning home on October the 7th. So for those of you out there in radio land or listening land or television land, whoever's receiving this, mark your calendars and make your potential plans, because we're, like I said, we're going to take a maximum of 30 people, and we're going to begin taking those reservations at our January annual meeting held here in these very council chambers, I think the second Sunday in January.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Seal.
Thank you.
And you'll let us know that date once it's confirmed?
I shall.
Very good. Reports or other announcements?
You're going to talk about tree lighting and ribbon cutting?
Well, you want to kick it off?
I could do that.
Okay.
November 29th, which is a Tuesday evening, will be about 5:30 in the evening, will be the annual tree lighting of the Christmas tree down at the Four Corners outside of Key Bank. And an additional activity that at the same time this year will be an official opening of Michigan Avenue. Be a ribbon cutting and some announcements, and I believe there'll be some refreshments there. So, John, did I steal your thunder? No? Okay.
Should be a very nice event.
What time is that, David?
5:30 is the time that I have.
It's the time I have. Is that correct, John? 5:30? Okay. Excellent. Very good. Any other reports or announcements? Okay, Mr. Campbell, do you want to briefly go over the strategic plan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And like before, in the past, unless there's questions, but as you can see on the very front at the top of the report, the plan are the dates in the various distinctions in pink or green or in light blue, and how staff is moving forward to obtain primarily the one-year task, but there's some items that aren't the one-year task, but we wanted to put information and update that for you. So if there's any questions, we'd be happy to.
Great. Any questions for Mr. Campbell? Mr. Rhodes?
This is more of a comment than a question, since I won't be on the city council next year when this plan is reviewed. But objective 3 of goal 1, goal 1 is maintain and grow a healthy center. Objective 3 is improve access to our downtown center of community. I want to strongly encourage this group to move forward expeditiously on the potential sidewalk from Austin Road or Saline River Drive to the bridge, now that MDOT has so kindly provided us a sidewalk on the north side of Michigan Avenue from Mills down to the bridge. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments or questions?
Mayor.
Mr. Gearbuck?
And I brought this up before, but I think our objective 1 under goal 2, community life and health development, you and I have been talking about our non-discrimination ordinance and attempting to have that adopted. I personally feel that that is extremely important at this point in time. I've talked to other members of council. My concerns have been expressed that I believe it is time that we now put this in place. We had hoped that the state would move forward on something, and knowing what has been in place and what's now happening in our country, it's now going to be a concern that I think we as a community need to push forward for this. We've had some examples of it, and maybe I've been a little hesitant on it because I felt that I wanted to look forward to thinking that things would move forward as a country and as a community. I'm not so sure that, and I don't feel that positive that's going to happen. So hopefully, I want to show that our community is continuing to be a growing, accepting, and wanting community, that it's time to show that in words and in writing and in ordinance, that we are a community that supports all our community, whether they're gay, whether they're straight, whether they're of different religions, whether they're of different aspects of environment or anything else. For me, I have friends that have scared, that are concerns. 20 years ago when I first got on council, this was an issue. I didn't feel it was going to become an issue again. It seems like it is. I've been told at times I was not part of Saline, even though I've grown up here and my family's been here forever. I'm not going to have that happen again, and I'm going to hopefully have my council members agree with me that it is time for this ordinance to be put in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbuck. Additional comments or questions? No? Okay, well then let's move on to Celtic Festival roof. I had a conversation with our Parks and Rec Director today as well as our city manager, and in the interest of providing council with a sufficient amount of data so that we can make an informed decision in the future, I think it would be valuable if everyone find an opportunity to go up to the rec center and take a look at the issues that we're currently experiencing and even climb the roof if you're so inclined. Although I have been told by our Parks and Rec Director that if you do, make sure you're wearing comfortable shoes and pants, and ladies, please no dresses. But if there are no objections, what I'd like to have happen probably tomorrow or Wednesday is the city manager will send out an email with a few dates, and hopefully you can adjust your schedules accordingly and make one of those appointments. Again, it would probably be a 25-minute, hour max. Tour the facility, take a look at what's happening. Go up on the roof if that's your wish, and of course at that time you could have any questions or concerns about the facility addressed. So again, expect an email sometime either tomorrow or Wednesday from the city manager. Okay? And then finally, in that same conversation, we talked about the Salt Springs historic marker. We would like to do a brief ceremony, and we've been throwing around dates left and right for the past 2 weeks. And Director Scruggs suggested that maybe we do something next week. Did she say 7 o'clock? 6:30? 6:45. 6:45 before our council meeting for maybe a 10-15-minute thing, if that would work for everybody. Again, you don't have to attend, but we would love to have everyone from City Council there.
Yep.
Okay? And why don't you want to send an email about that as well, and then you can remind people in your weekly communique? Okay, very good. Excellent. Is there anything else to be brought up as a discussion item this evening? No, then we'll proceed to public comments. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time, make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record.
Mary Hess regarding the rezoning. I think that when Mr. Rubel was speaking, there on the density, the floodplain has to be taken out. I don't know how many people were here when the floods came in the 70s and the water went over the bridge on Waterworks Road. So when they say they're not going to have basements, it's because the land is not conducive to the basements. To say $1,400 or $1,600 a month rental is not exactly in my price range, and I think that it definitely was not, when Mr. Rubel was thinking about ability to do R1A and his statistics, that he was thinking of flat land. And I think the study said that each household has 10, they figure 10 trips a day. So if you had single homes, there would be only that multiplication. And with these amount that can possibly be done, put the 10 on that. It is going to be a dangerous corner. Thank you.
Additional citizen comments. Mr. Roth, please.
I have 2 comments. One, for the past 6 weeks or more, I've been trying to tune into Channel 18 for the live coverage of these meetings. I brought it to the attention, but it appears to be that not an urgent item. We are charged monthly our PEG fees, and I think we should get something for our PEG fees and hold up the contract that we typically have. So whatever fix is necessary, I think you should do that as fast as possible. And during the discussion with the Webster group that was up here, I kind of find it questionable that in the report that was done by the DEQ, and this is dated 3/27/2014, its ID number is N5404. I would recommend every council member to read that, plus our city manager, and see there's a lot of things brought in as far as how it's managed, odor complaints, and thus. So it's been an issue. They were passed under conditions some things would be changed. A lot of them operational. I would hope that that would be put in effect during the time we're waiting for some physical changes to help abate the odors. So please look that up. It's a very, very important, and I hope when they do the next study that they take in consideration. It mentions something about complaints in there. I don't know whether we should complain to the AQD every time rather than call in to the DPW, to the odor or the sewage plant and let them know that we smell something. Kind of mentions in there that we really didn't have that many complaints except for one family. I could have complained day after day and multiple times. I'm tired of complaining, registering a complaint, it be taken note of, and never get a report back. They just take note of it. Why do we have to do this continuously so they can report it to DEQ? Next thing that I just heard with Webster saying, when they get a complaint, who's going to make this complaint? Should it be I? Then they would take but 30 minutes for getting Tetra Tech to come back and find out where it's really coming from. And Webster gets paid this gigantic amount of money. I invite them to put an odor meter on my house where they bring in the sewage, septic, is 200 feet from my house. I smell that sewage that's spilled in their test truck. They spilled sewage and it smelled like we are sticking my head in the toilet. Waiting to 2018 is too long for people go through and dump stuff out and we have to put up with the smell. So please, take a look at this. Whatever we can do operational, let's do such. And if that is the big smell, suspend that until this stuff is taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. Are there additional citizen comments? Okay, very good. Is there any other business to be brought before Saline City Council this evening? No, again, we appreciate everyone's attendance. We appreciate the public comments. Again, as was discussed during the during new business item 16-200, I understand and I get that people are frustrated. I don't live in the area, but I would be just as frustrated as Mr. Roth and many others. And you know, my pledge to you is that I will work expeditiously to resolve this matter and do it thoroughly and do it once and for all. No more gimmicks, no more guarantees and promises in which we fall short, but doing it right and doing it thoroughly once and for all. Again, if there's nothing further, then the chair would entertain a motion to convene into closed session to consider material exempt from discussion or disclosure by state or federal statute, in particular for the purpose of discussing strategy connected with negotiations of collective bargaining agreements. The city will not, I repeat, will not reconvene into regular session at the conclusion of the closed session. Is there a motion? Moved by CO. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by McClellan. The clerk will please call the roll.
Councilmember Rhodes?
Yes.
Councilmember Terhar?
Yes.
Councilmember Gearba?
Yes.
Councilmember McClellan?
Yes.
Councilmember CO?
Yes.
Councilmember Dillon?
Yes.
And Mayor Morrow.
Yes, we will now convene into closed session at, what is that, 9:42 p.m.